Kristen.
And I'm Bethany.
And this is Looking for the Middle,
the Christian Girl's Guide to Modern Dating.
We're here to help you date with confidence while honoring the Lord and to show you that your identity and contentment are in Christ. We're going to give you the tools that you need to date successfully and be set up well for success in a godly marriage.
If you've ever felt like you didn't really belong with any of the extremes in dating today, well, you're not alone. Neither did we. And that's why we're here looking for the middle.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Looking for the Middle. We are pumped that y'all are here. We are pumped to be here. It's going to be a good day.
It is.
We are talking all about the things we wish our mom's generation knew about dating, which if y'all have been listening for the past, at least 3 seasons?
Yeah.
We've started unintentionally, but kind of ironically having at least one episode a season that's slightly snarky and passive aggressive. But also helpful.
Yeah.
So that's what this episode is going to be. It is going to be helpful.
I think it's gonna, and I think our list is a good, helpful list.
Yes.
I think it came from a place. This one, where some of the episodes were actually a little more snarky and passive aggressive, this one came from that place.
Yes.
I feel like, for sure.
Yes.
And has kind of come to a constructive place.
Yeah, because I feel like this will be good, hopefully, to spark conversations with people you know, whether it's your mom or just people in that age range and generational segment, because dating is very different, which we'll talk about.
Yes.
But yeah, we're gonna dive deep on all that. It's gonna be fun.
Love it. Before we do that, though, let's go over the usual things at the top here. First one, social media. If you don't follow us on social media, you should. We try to do good about posting, but we go through spurts where we don't. I'll just admit it up front. So,
but there's always funny things on there to
there's
look
always
at.
that. So LFTM_podcast is our Instagram. So go follow us over there. We also have a Facebook group that we have just recently started, not a page, but a group for you guys. And it's so cool. There's I don't know. I think we're probably getting close to 100 of you guys in there now,
That's awesome.
which is not a ton, but it's enough to where it's not 3 people. You, me, and one or two others.
One other person.
But it's enough to where y'all can, I love seeing comments where someone's like, oh, I love doing that too. Or, oh, I listen to that podcast. Or, oh, I do this. So I'm just really excited for you guys to be able to kind of form some friendships and kind of maybe find a kindred spirit as you're navigating all of this dating stuff. So that is on Facebook. That is called LFTM Community. If you go search for that, you can request to join. And I try to get people added pretty quickly to that. Also, if you don't want to have to go to all that trouble of searching, if you are on our newsletter, there is a button for getting in there in the newsletter. That comes out every Thursday, so you can keep an eye out for that. If you haven't signed up for the newsletter, head over to our website or the link in our bio on Instagram. Lookingforthemiddle.com is the website, and you can sign up for the newsletter there. There's a button up at the top. So I think that rounds out the housekeeping at the top of the show. So Kristen, let's move over now to your favorite segment, which is your question of the day. And that was said with all the sarcasm in the world.
I am so bad at picking these. Okay. I literally ended up on a list that was 151 questions of the day for children.
Oh, fun.
Because that's where we're at. Okay. If you had 1 extra hour in the day, how would you spend it?
Am I allowed to say sleep, or is that kind of a...
That's a given.
Okay.
So something else.
So not sleeping. I'd probably be learning a new skill. I have this running list of things that I want to learn how to do.
Yeah.
Gardening is one. So probably
fun.
Gardening is one. I would really like to get good at baking. Not necessarily bake a cake and decorate it, but be able to make my own pastry dough or different things that.
That's fun.
So I have this running list of things. So probably if I had an extra hour a day, I would just block it off for whatever skill I was working on at the moment, and it would probably change over time.
That's a great answer.
But I'm only saying that because you told me I couldn't say sleep. So
yeah,
sleep sound too productive.
No, sleep is always the first choice. That's a really good answer. I would read. I would love to have an hour where I would love for it to be manipulated where, Kristen, you only get this hour if you spend it reading. So that I wouldn't try to do something else with it. And I have so many books that I want to read that I haven't read yet. So yeah, I would read.
I like that one.
Yeah, mainly fiction. I wouldn't want it to be I mean, I like reading nonfiction, but I like the escape of just reading something that's not real. So that would be mine.
Cool. Okay, so are we ready to jump in for today?
Yes.
I do want to make one disclaimer before we start. I know this is like called things we wish our moms knew or whatever, but this is not like, so we came from like a snarky place, whatever. We don't sit around and snark about our moms, about these specific things. Like several of these, maybe even a good many of these, don't really even apply to my mom specifically. She's great about this stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't want y'all to think that. I also know our moms probably listen, and I don't want them to think we're actually talking. It's kind of like, oh my word, are they trying to tell me something through this episode? And I don't even know. Blah, blah. That's not what this is. Okay.
No.
But as a general overarching theme, as far as an older generation, these are the things we wish they knew. And these come from stories friends have told us, things we've seen and experienced, or whatever. So this is not a hit piece on our moms.
Yes, good call.
Okay, so let's start here. We have a list, as we always do. 7 things we wish our mom's generation knew about dating today. First thing, and this one is broad, we're going to take it into the details in a second, is that times have changed. Dating just does not work the same anymore. It's not what it used to be. It's not viewed the same. It's not executed the same. It's not approached the same. And I think like our parents' generation has their mental memory of how they approach dating, and they're like, well, why don't you just do the same thing? And I'm like, trust me, even if I wanted to, you can't.
No,
that's how you end up
doesn't
on our
work.
episode in a few weeks, which is good ways to end up alone.
Yeah.
So it's just not the same anymore. And I think that's a hard with anything. Why would they understand that? You know what I mean? Like, they have no reason to know the ins and outs of dating today. I mean, especially if they're not. I mean, who knows? Maybe your parents are in the dating world today, and they probably have a really much better idea of what we're talking about. So they're probably not who we're talking to in this. But for the most part, they don't know.
Yeah. And it's frustrating, but then you have to remember, like, I need to give them great. It's like how you feel when, or at least how I feel when I help my parents with technology.
Yes.
Like, it's just not like, you know what? They just don't know. They're trying. They just don't get it.
Bless their little hearts.
Yes. So yeah, it's just, you can't blame them, but then I know it gets frustrating at the same time because you're like, why can you not just understand that this is different? But if you've never experienced it, it's hard to wrap your brain around that.
Okay. So if you are in that generation of which we speak, and you are listening to this either of your own volition or because your daughter or whoever sent you this and said, hey mom, listen to this, we're going to dive into now some of the ways things have changed, because that's a really easy thing for us to say. Well, things are different, mom. Things aren't the same. You don't understand. Dating's not how it used to be. And if you just leave it at that, that's not really helpful. So we have a list here of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ways or reasons that it's different now.
Yeah.
Buckle up. Here we go.
So the first thing is the fact that we live in a very digital age, which was not the case when our parents were dating. To hear my dad talk about the first computer he ever saw is absolutely comical, because it was like the size of a room, and it was just like code.
Yeah.
And green.
My dad was a computer science major in the early 80s. So
oh gosh,
times have changed since then, that's for sure.
Yes. So you think, I mean, I know when we say, oh, it's digital, people immediately go to online dating. And yes, that's true. We'll talk about that. But like, we also have texting, which they did not have available to them. We have social media. We have FaceTime. Like, our parents literally had landlines and in-person dates.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, phones that weren't attached to the wall is a novel thing compared to that. And I mean, I heard someone say, I mean, this has been years ago, but I was like, wow, it's so true. Calling someone and saying, hey, where are you, is a very new thing.
I've never
because
thought
up
about
until now,
that.
when we had cell phones and you just took them with you, when you called someone, you knew where they were.
Yeah.
Because that's where you called.
Where you called. You called a place.
And so it's prevalent and it affects everything. Like the amount of information that's available to you like that. I snapped if that didn't come through. It's just astounding.
Yeah. Well, and you think about too, you know, I've talked about on here before how my parents only dated for 2.5 months before they got engaged. But they were like, we saw each other all the time. And when we weren't seeing each other, we were on the phone. But because they didn't have a whole lot of other outlets, it was mainly hanging out in person. And so that did kind of expedite things. Whereas like we can still do that now, but we have so many other ways to communicate. We can, you know, be like, oh, we live an hour away. So, hey, do you want to FaceTime tonight? Because I'm getting off work late or whatever.
Yeah.
And we're not, you know, you're getting more time because you're not spending the time in the car. Or there's a long distance. I feel like that's much more common now because our world has expanded because of technology and all of that.
Expanded and gotten smaller at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and it's easier to be able to do those things. But like you said, there's a downside too of it's not face-to-face interaction. And on top of that, with people getting married later, with careers being established first, it's not as much from an earlier generations when people went to school and then they got married. So you had all this time to spend together because you were probably in high school or college.
Yeah.
Whereas now, like, even if someone did live 20 minutes away from me, well, I have to work all day, every day. I have this that's going on. I have, you know, church. I have things that you can't just drop, and they wouldn't expect you to. But even if you live close by, it's different than seeing each other every day at school or just hanging out while you do homework after class. You still may only see each other on the weekends. You still may have to FaceTime in the middle of the week because that's all the time you have.
Yeah.
And so it does kind of draw out that process a little bit.
Yeah. And my mom made a good point the other day. She was talking about even just how church has changed since, like, from now to when they were in church. Because she talked about, like, you know, you were there Sunday morning, and then you had you went out to lunch, and then you had service Sunday night, and then she's like, and then you had Monday night visitation, and then you had a Wednesday night church service, and then
probably prayer meeting one of the other
prayer
nights.
meetings or like Bible study, and then, you know, you were like doing all of your community was rooted in church, and so if you met somebody in church, you still saw them 4 or 5 times a week.
So true.
And whereas now that's not the case. If you have church twice a week, I feel like that's even, people don't have Sunday night services anymore.
Yeah.
Unless it's like this is just another service time we offer of the same thing from Sunday morning. And a lot of churches still do Wednesday nights.
Yeah.
But more so for
small groups
like and youth than they do the youths. That makes me sound old. Student ministry though.
Yeah.
Than like having a Wednesday night service for adults. And so that's even different. So it's just you're not, unless you're meeting somebody at work, the likelihood of you seeing them several times a week because of a part of your life that overlaps, it's gone
very
down.
slim.
And so that's why I think the digital stuff has ramped up so much, because we realize, oh, I met this guy at this thing that I only go to every 2 weeks. And so I need to figure out other ways to talk to him or see him or whatever, because I have a job and he has a job and we have friends and we have other things, and, you know, while we're figuring this out, I'm not going to see him every day. So I think that's I think that's probably the biggest impact and change. Yeah. And it's the hardest one to explain because there's no way our parents will ever experience that. In the context of dating. They can get on social media and they can, you know, do whatever, but they'll never understand the impact that has on a dating relationship. And so it's tough. Yeah, I agree. And then the next thing is just that our notes here have that commitment timelines are all messed up. And I think what we mean by that is, like, today, it used to be you made a commitment to someone and you were committed, and like your parents, after 2.5 months of dating, did they know? I mean, we sit there and go, oh my word, how could you know enough about that person to make that kind of commitment then? But to them, it was like, okay, we have figured out what we need to. We line up on these big things. We are committing to each other, and whatever else we find out, we'll deal with. Obviously, they knew enough to know that there weren't any big secrets. Yeah. But there were things that I'm sure came up after that. They're married, they're committed, they're married. I'm sure there are things that came up that if they happened to someone today who was not even to that point, probably they would have broken up.
I bet anything. I love Kristen's parents. I'm not sitting here thinking of like these certain things. I'll say that about my parents, anyone.
Yeah.
But they made that commitment, and then you work through those things. Whereas today it's almost flipped to the point of we want to know everything about someone to the point that we feel like the relationship would be easy with them. It's not going to be all that hard work. It's not going to be whatever. It'll just be easy. And we want to know all of that before we make a commitment. Instead of saying, no, I'm committing to you and I'm accepting of your flaws and all of those things, our commitment timeline is just completely backwards now.
Yeah. It's like the way we were talking about it before we started recording was it's like we try to make dating so casual, but then we also like screw that up royally and make it too committed all at the same time. Like,
yeah,
that's more on the Christian standpoint, but like it's just so all over the place. It's like we don't want to really commit, but we don't date multiple people at the same time. Like I feel like that's the thing my parents and even more so my grandparents talk about. Like, you went out with one guy Friday and another guy Saturday if he asked you. And I'm like,
excuse
what?
you?
No, you floozy? Like, what are you doing?
Grandma?
Seriously. Got like a grandma that's a player or something. Like, what the heck? But it's just so, like you said, the commitment timeline is skewed because we're trying so hard to make it casual, but we're scared to commit because we know the weight of it. But they're really, like, we're putting too much weight on it early, unintentionally a lot of times. It's just so convoluted. Like, it's... Yeah, it's that. That's where I don't even
yeah, well,
it's just so like mixed up.
And I think a part of that, and they go hand in hand. I don't know if it's a chicken and the egg situation. I feel like with today, there are so many different stages to dating.
Yes. Don't get me started on the talking stage. Don't do it.
Talking stage. But it's like, okay, we're just talking, which means...
You know what? Hold on. I never interrupt, but
let
me.
You go
oh my
for
gosh.
It.
So let me give y'all an example of the talking stage. So I am at my middle school basketball banquet the other night. Okay. I have a little 7th grader on my team. She's absolutely adorable. And we're all taking pictures after the banquet's over because there was like a balloon arch and whatever. And so we had all been taking pictures, and her and one of the boys from I think he's in 8th grade. So she has a thing for liking these older boys. But they go to take a picture, and I had no idea that this was a thing. And so I look at one of my other players. I'm like, is this happening? Like, and she was like, oh yeah, this is a thing. And I'm like, are they like dating? And I'm like, oh no, they're not dating. They're just a thing. This is the first time. Just a thing. But then she's like, they're just talking. But like, this is the first time they've seen each other since they've been talking. They literally go up. Me and Kevin were talking about it afterwards. They go, they don't look at each other. They take the picture. They put their arm around each other, super awkwardly like middle schoolers do.
Aww.
She just got braces, so she's smiling with her mouth closed because she's so self-conscious. They smile, take the picture, immediately walk away from each other. Don't talk, don't do anything.
Oh my word.
And I'm like, but they'll probably go home and text each other all night. All these like 3-word text messages.
Back to the digital age. There's a downfall.
Yes. It's like you get
don't communicate in person.
Yeah, you get so much more comfortable hiding behind your screen. But I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, this is what middle schoolers do.
Yes.
This is not what adults should be doing.
Thank you.
And there are so many adults that still do, we're a thing. Oh, we're talking. Oh, we're this. Oh, we're that. We see each other in person, and it's this weird, awkward thing, but then I'm going to go home and text you for 14 hours.
Yep.
And that's dramatic. But like,
yeah.
I'm like, this should die in middle school.
Thank you.
Maybe early high school.
Thank you.
And it just hasn't, and it's so frustrating.
It is.
Sorry.
No, I get it. And it's so true because you have like, okay, we're talking. And then I guess once you go out this arbitrary number of times after talking, well, then you're dating. But it's not official. Like, we're just dating.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, well, is he your boyfriend? No, we're just dating. And then it's like, oh, well, you have to, like, somehow both know when you're ready to not be just dating and actually be boyfriend and girlfriend. But he has to ask, and he has to, like, make sure. And it's like I don't know. We laugh because used to just be there were marriage proposals. And now you have to be like, oh, well, will you be my girlfriend? It's like this precursor to will you marry me? And then there's people proposing to go to their promposals. Like, it's just gotten so out of hand. There's all this stuff that you have to remember and keep up with. And like, have you had a DTR? And what are your expectations? And where is this going? Is it serious? Well, I don't know. We're just dating. Or is it serious? Well, he's a boyfriend, but he's not a serious boyfriend. Like, what?
Yeah.
What in the world?
That's what
I can't even keep up with all of it.
Well, that was what was so funny last night when Kevin and I were talking. He was like, what dates do I need to remember where you're not going to get mad at me?
Seriously.
And I'm like, our wedding anniversary. And he was like, is that it? I'm like, I mean, it'd be nice if you remembered when you proposed, just as like today was the day that I proposed.
Yeah.
But we don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I still have to look at my calendar on like what day we started dating and when we said I love you. Like I marked all of that so I would remember.
Okay.
But I don't
real.
we don't sell like for the first few months we're like, oh, we've been dating for 4 months or whatever. But now it's like I'm not gonna expect. I think it's the 27th of June, but I'm not 100% sure.
Say, is this that's my dad's birthday?
Oh,
I was gonna say, is that a thing most girls remember?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I literally had to write it down.
Okay, because I was like,
now my sister does.
Okay,
but they've been dating for 6 years, so they have an anniversary.
Yeah, I was talking to someone, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm seeing this guy. And she goes, oh well, is it official? Like, what's your date? And I'm like, my date? I don't.
That was my sister. Yeah,
I know.
Yeah, I'll call her out. I don't care.
And I was like,
yeah,
I don't know.
Like,
am I supposed to remember this? And anyway, so then when you said that, I'm like, oh man, am I actually supposed to remember these things when I'm like seeing someone? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I don't think
so. Okay, good. So, wedding anniversary is a must. Yes, obviously. Proposal date is
if you just remember that, yeah,
preferred.
Yeah,
okay,
preferred. Like my parents still remember the day of their first date.
Okay.
I think I remember mine.
Anywho, okay.
Oh gosh, yeah. So, but just there's so many things.
So many things of like, okay, this is when we started talking. This is the day we became official. This is the day this is the day that.
Yeah.
Like, it's a lot to keep up with, and I feel like that goes into this whole commitment thing.
And what's so crazy too now is the number of people who will talk about like, oh yeah, we kissed before we started dating.
Yeah,
like that's so crazy too to me. I'm like, oh. I mean, like, were y'all dating, but you just weren't official, but you kissed in the middle? Or, like, were y'all just, like, hanging out or whatever that means? I hate when people say that, too. Yeah. Talking and hanging out are both oh, my gosh. But it's just like, what? You have no commitment with this person, and you're just, like, planning one on them. Like, okay.
Yeah. Which leads us to our next thing on our list here of times have changed. And here's one way they have. Go ahead, Kristen.
Girls are a lot more forward now. Mm-hmm. Which can be equal parts good and intimidating if you are not a naturally forward female.
Yes.
Looking in the mirror. That was something that really, I don't know, like intimidated me. And my mom is very much like this, even though girls weren't super forward.
Yeah.
While she was dating, my mom is a very like, go after what you want.
Right.
Make it happen kind of a person. And I was, on the other hand, like, well, if it's not, I don't want to make something happen if it's not supposed to. How will I know if you ever actually
really liked me?
Yeah. And so it was trying to find that middle ground of like, I'm not going to sit at home and wait to date the Amazon delivery guy, but I'm also not going to just force something either. And I feel like that was really hard for me when I would see girls getting into relationships because they were the ones that were initiating things. I'm like, okay, I want this. Like, is this just the way it is now? Behind. Yeah. Like, do I just have to like suck it up and do this, or like, is it still okay for me to wait for a guy who's going to initiate something?
Yes, it is. Obviously, we just talked about this in the couch guys. There's nothing wrong with a girl asking a guy out if she wants to. However, I still would say that's probably not best.
Yeah.
And I'll just be blunt here.
I love when you're blunt. Go for it.
In this and anything else, women have to step into these roles because guys don't.
Basically, if we never require them to. What movie is that? Like, it's Think Like a Man.
I've never seen it. I know. You made that face at me last time I said I hadn't seen it. I know. Go ahead.
You would actually really like. It's not High School Musical. Bethany hasn't seen High School Musical. If y'all want to send in the hate mail, you can. I will 100% support it. But you would actually like Think Like a Man. Language is a little rough for people who are listening, so be advised. But Steve Harvey wrote the book Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man. Okay. And so there are like 5 couples in the movie.
Gotcha.
And all the girls get the book and start to implement his strategies without the guys knowing. And one of the girls has been like it's Gabrielle Union, has been living with her boyfriend for like 4 or 5 years. It's basically a frat house.
Yeah.
He won't commit. He won't propose. He won't do anything. And the chapter is basically like, he has not proposed because you have not required him to.
Yeah.
Or he has not grown up because you have not required him to. And I know that's a little like,
it's a bit
much. But the principle is like, if you have an expectation and you don't, I'm not saying you got to manipulate the guy, but like if you want to be with a guy who's going to take initiative, but yet you're the one taking all the initiative, you can't get mad at him when he doesn't take any initiative because you haven't really given him any space to. Right. Maybe that's a better way to put it.
Yeah. Well, and like with that, he's not taking initiative. He's not growing up. He is in this passive place. And instead of saying, no, if that's a standard that you want to hold someone to, saying, okay, no, I'm going to walk away from this. We, in our insecurity of being alone and not wanted, step into that role because the guys don't. Mm-hmm. And so then why would he? Because you already did. And so instead of saying, nope, I'm walking away from the potential of whatever this could be because I don't want that, we put ourselves in that position. And so I think in dating or in anything, when we step into a role that a man should be taking because he's not, we're not helping ourselves because we're taking over a role that we shouldn't have, and we're not helping him because we're not calling him to excellence and to being what the Lord has called him to be as a man. We're taking that over. And I think that's exactly what you see in the fall, is that we are to, like, that's part of it, in that, like, we're striving after taking over the man's role. And that is not going to work out well for us.
No, and it's not.
Okay, I'm going to get off my soapbox.
No, you're good.
Offend people.
No, you're good. So. I think these last two of, y'all, the times have changed point is like half the episode. So the last, we said we had 7 things. The last 6 are like not rapid fire, but a little more concise. But there are 2 more reasons we feel like time has changed. I feel like these go hand in hand. So Bethany, why don't you like break these down?
Okay, they do. And these are more, we're talking about times have changed in dating. Things are different. And these are more taking a look back at maybe causes as to why. Mm-hmm. You know, the other things were just like facts of the matter and that things are different. This is looking back at maybe some contributors as to why. Why is dating different? Why do we approach it different? Why are we getting married later than people ever have before? And I think these 2 things are huge contributors. The first one we kind of were just touching on, of like a generation that as a whole raised their children to extend their adolescence indefinitely is not helpful to anyone. And that's what so many people in our generation were raised to be. They were raised to do what you want and go where you want, spend money how you want, take care of yourself first, you know, establish your career, find yourself, like be whatever you want to be. All of these things that basically just extend someone's adolescence and doesn't ever make them grow up and actually make adult decisions and do hard things and be a grown-up.
Yeah.
And so that, when you have a lot of people running around not acting like grown-ups, they're going to get married later. They're going to mature later, all of those things. But I think no, they weren't pushed in the first place because everybody got a trophy and everybody got whatever they wanted and no one was held to a standard. And I'm using terms like everyone and no one. Y'all know what I mean.
Yeah, that's isn't like an across the board
thing.
But I also feel like, too, there's a lot of like, I don't know. I feel like parents helping too much.
Yeah.
Like my dad's talked to me about this a lot, of like there's a fine line, and like you don't want your kids to fail, but at the same time, like you can't save them from everything, like, or that's just not a realistic, like it's not a good way to set them up for life because you're not always going to be there to protect them from everything. And sometimes they need to learn some tougher lessons, and it's not like, oh, I'm going to let you fall on your face, but I can't bail you out of everything. And there are some parents who just bail their kids out of everything, whether that's financially, whether that's
jail,
disciplinary, however you want to go about that. But you know, if you're a parent and you're listening, like I'm not a parent, so I'm not going to sit here and try to tell you that I know exactly how to do your job, but I know that there have been times where like I've learned lessons that I'm really grateful I learned, and I'm really grateful that my parents didn't just give me the easy way out of it.
More of a, you got yourself into this mess, and the best thing we can do for you is let you figure out how to get out of it.
And we'll support you and love you through it. But like,
absolutely,
we're not going to be
the white knight.
Yeah. Exactly.
I completely agree.
Because that's going to translate to, if that's your mentality and then you get married, that's going to make it really hard to leave and cleave.
Yeah.
When every other time you've been like, oh, I'm just going to run home to my parents when I need something. It's like, no, you got to figure it out. You're going to be the parent soon. Like, you've got to do this. You know,
countdown is on.
Yeah. So it's just, it's tough on both parties, but at the same time, I think it's for the best.
Yeah.
And like Bethany said, the last thing you want is to extend anyone's adolescence. No. Like, let them grow up. Like, that's what they're supposed to do. That's what we're all supposed to do.
Exactly. And then the second thing here, the last part of this times have changed point, is that I think, and we've looked at this before, the actual statistics involved with this, but the skyrocketing divorce rates of the previous generation, and maybe even previous too, have had a great impact. I don't mean good. I mean like monumental, massive impact on the rising marriage age of this generation. And I know that from looking at like studies that have been done in different things, but also from just like talking to people that I know, that I ask questions about. I want to know things of. People are terrified of repeating what they saw the previous generation. They're terrified of, you know, going through that again. They saw what that did to the marriage and the family and all of those things. And they're terrified of that happening to them. And so as an alternative, they say, well, I'm going to wait until I know every little possible thing about this person. And I know that there's no way it could not work out. And I know what's going to happen. And I have everything figured out. And I'm going to do that until I know that, like we're going back to, like, this will be easy. This won't be hard. Like, I can handle this. It'll be fine. We won't have to go through hard things, and I'm not going to end up in that same place. And so that's why you see people getting married later and later, and not at all. That's why you see people living together so much before they're married. That's why you see all of these things, because as a whole, marriage was not modeled well for our generation, to put it bluntly.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with the fallout of that in a sinful world.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really have anything to add to that other than yes and amen.
So, I think we have established then that times have changed. Things are different.
Things are very different.
So, that wraps up point 1.
Yes. Let's hit point 2 now. If
you were listening and you realize we have 7, don't worry. It's kind of like when you're at church and the pastor's like, okay, first point, second point. And then he gets to the third one and I'm like, you got like 7 minutes left.
Yeah.
Like, how are we going to?
It's amazing how, like, I feel like point 2 is always the shortest with pastors, and I don't know why.
Point 1 takes forever.
Yeah. And they're like, oh, I got to cut half point 2 to make sure I get to point 3.
Exactly.
Or if you were my pastor growing up, be like, I have 3 points. I'm only going to make it through 1.5. I'm like, great. He's like, check the sermon notes on the website if you want the full thing.
Well, no, that's funny. Ours does the same thing, but it's like, well, this will just be 2 parts.
Yeah. We're just going to extend the preaching schedule.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay.
All right. So Bethany, what's point 2?
Point 2 of things we wish our mom's generation knew about dating is that my singleness is not something you have to explain away when you talk about me. I'm like, oh, poor Bethany, she's single, but y'all know that's my soapbox.
Always a but.
And you say but as if it's like, but don't worry, she's a very normal person. She's a full functioning human being. She's single. And I've used this example before of, there was a missionary from that our church supports who had been here, and he was talking about this ministry work with these 2 women, and he meant nothing by it. Sweetest person. But it just solidified in my mind, like, what irks me about this. Like, he was talking about these 2 women who do this, like, great ministry work in their church. Like, great work. And with both of them, he's, like, talking about these women, and he's like, so-and-so, and, kind of told who they were, and then he was like, well, and she's single, but she does all of this great stuff. She's single. I mean, he didn't say she's single over and over, but like, he would say she's single, but she's really productive and she does all this stuff for the Lord, and da 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 da. And it's like the comparison being, she's single, but somehow she has managed to overcome that and actually be a productive part of society. Yeah. And I feel like this is unique to the church. And so that's something I wish that a previous generation, or maybe even 2, realized, is that, would I like to be married? Sure. Do I wish it had happened sooner? Sure. But I'm not, and that's okay. And it's not something that you have to, like, explain away or compensate for or sweep under the rug. I'm still me. It's just who I am.
Yeah.
And so I wish that was something that they didn't feel like they had to
justify.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not even less of a person.
No.
Well, and I feel like too, there's this pressure when like, I don't know if this was the case when this guy was talking about the two missionaries, but if like, let's say the other one was married. And because he talked about like, oh yeah, her and her husband and they have 2 kids. And then you feel like you have to acknowledge the marital status and family state of the other person. You don't.
Yeah.
Like for me personally, like I would rather you just not say anything than to be like, oh, and she's single. Like,
because then it sounds like,
yeah, it's
guys
either like,
line up here.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, you don't have to, you know, list all of that. Like, you don't need to, you know, if my, you know, because for a while it was, oh yeah, my brother and his fiance or his girlfriend, they were together for 4 years before they got married. And then, yes, the youngest, Danielle, she's dating Dylan. They've been dating for 6 years. And then there's Kristen. And if they don't say anything, you assume I don't have a person attached.
Right.
Like, let the other person read between the lines. Like, you don't have to point it out and then have to make some reason as to why I'm okay. Like, just let it be. And my snarkiness is starting to show.
Yeah.
But, yeah, just singleness doesn't need to or have to be justified by anybody. And if you are listening and you're thinking like, oh, I do that a lot, like maybe ask yourself like, why do you feel the need to do that?
Yeah. Well, and I feel like there's this almost like there's this idea, and I have fallen prey to it, I will admit that, of once you're a certain age and you're single and you've never been married, you start to say, okay, but why? What's that thing that is like, oh, that's why they're single? And so I feel like there may be this subconscious need to be like, she's single, but don't worry, she's normal.
Yeah.
To like,
there's not a fatal
combat
flaw
this
that's
like thing that's like, oh, I bet there's something there. And you know, I said to someone recently, I was talking about, I was like, I'm 35, I've never been married, and yeah, I'm always just waiting for the guy to like figure out what that problem is, because every other one has, but no one will tell me what it is. You know what I mean? And so I'm aware of it. I don't need you to like.
Yeah. Well, and I think that goes back to the fact that because our parents' generation got married so young that if someone did get married when they were 35, it was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's so normal now.
Right.
Like, it's so normal for people to get married in their 30s. And it drives me crazy when they're like, I've literally heard people, like older people, be like, oh, he's 40, he's not married. What's the deal? And I'm like, why does there have to be a deal?
Yeah.
Like, what if, like, I think about, I'm not going to say her name, but the sweet lady that y'all know that got married. Like, she got married to a guy who was a widower who had been married for, what, 20
I don't know.
years?
I mean, he had grown children. So yeah.
And for her to talk about and be like, this was who the Lord had for me, but he had to go through all this other stuff before he was ready for me. It had absolutely nothing to do with her.
Yeah.
She was wonderful. I've never met her, but I've heard
She's
nothing
wonderful.
but good things about this woman.
Yeah.
I can't wait to meet her at some point, because every time somebody talks about her, it's just like, oh, like that's what you hear. And I'm so tired of people just assuming that like, oh, you're not, married and you're over 25. What's wrong with you? And people don't say it that bluntly, but like, that's the undercurrent of the conversation.
Yeah.
Or the questioning. And I just don't think that's fair. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's kind. And I don't think it's good. I mean, how many adjectives can I come up with? I just don't think that's a good mindset to have, or a good, thought pattern to have. Because I don't think it's true.
Well, and it reminds me of, did you see the new Little Women?
Yes.
Did we go see it? Did you go see it with me?
No, I saw it with my mom.
Okay.
Blubbered like a fool.
It'll get you. I will say, maybe we can put it in the newsletter. If you haven't seen this version of Little Women, you need to. It's a twist on the traditional portrayal of it. It's phenomenal. But there's a part where Jo is in the attic with her mom. And I don't remember. I don't want to, not to give everyone knows the story of Little Women, but I'm not going to go into too much detail, like what had just happened or whatever. But she's like frustrated, and she's venting to her mom. And I pulled it up here so I can read it. And she says, women, she's like, they have minds and they have souls as well as just hearts. And they've got ambition and they've got talent as well as just beauty. And I'm so sick of people saying that love is just all a woman is fit for. She's like, I'm so sick of it. And then there's like a pause. And then she's like, but I'm so lonely. And
I just cried.
I mean, when she said that, I was just like, I feel for her. I'm like,
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
Because that's how it's seen of like, okay, there's more to it than that. Like, there's more to being a woman. There's more to being single. Like, yeah, we have brains and we have whatever. And no one's questioning that. Like, in today's day and age in the church, that's not something that's like, no one would consciously question that.
Yeah.
But with the way people push things, the way people view like not being married, that's how it seems. It's like, well, there must be something wrong because that's the one thing you're here for, and you can't manage to get that right.
Yeah.
And I'm sick of it. Just like you said, I'm so sick of it.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, I'm like, but yeah, you're right, because I'm like,
I still want it.
I still want that. I can rail against it all I want, but at the same time, you're like, but yeah, I am lonely or alone or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's a weird
Tension.
that you kind of live in, but all of that to say, now I'm gonna go watch Little Women.
Yeah.
Because it was
movie.
fantastic. I probably saw it like 4 times in the theater.
See, I only saw it once. I need to go back.
I mean,
watch
and
it
I
again.
just, well, the way it was done with like the 2 different tellings of it, and like there's like this past and future, but the past is very warm, the future is very cool, just like in the way the cinematography and the color and the costumes. Y'all know I get into all of that stuff.
Yes.
It was just fantastic.
We
I will
highly
stop
recommend
gushing, but you've got to
go
see
watch it.
Yeah.
Yes. All right.
Okay.
Point 3.
So moving on.
Wow. We're like the pastors. We're going to make them shorter and shorter as we keep going. This one, well, let's just spit it out. Online dating is not a Prince Charming catalog.
Reach it.
Okay. I feel like
And
it's more like a fraud catalog.
on there for you to know that.
No, like so badly. I wanted to show, I think I did show my sister one time, like, do you want to see what this looks like? And I did. She was like, oh. I'm like, yes. This is not like, oh, here are the 14,000 most attractive people in the country.
Who have their lives together.
Yes, who love Jesus.
Who love the Lord.
And who aren't like dork holes. And just like...
Because that's the thing, too. The one thing I get the most from people is like, well, can't you just filter it?
God, I wish.
And I'm like, filter it on what? Please be normal?
Yeah.
Like, I've never found that as like a filtering criteria.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
But it's so true. It's not that. And I tell you, not too long ago, it's been a while, I was talking to like my parents about something. Just not something, but just like in general, talking about dating and like, it's so frustrating and how do you know what to do and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, do you want to see what we have to deal with? And because I screenshot like really interesting
Bethany
things.
has quite
And I send them to the girls. So I'm like, y'all.
Oh my
But
gosh.
anyway, so I just showed them a handful and they were flabbergasted.
Yeah.
Like absolutely floored. They're like, oh, like it was almost like, not that they thought I was making it up.
But like you were exaggerating.
Yeah.
It.
And then it was like, oh.
Yeah, no. This is our reality.
And yeah.
It's like the worst version of The Bachelor ever.
It is. Yeah, it is. So
yeah. Just keep that in mind.
if that's
people.
what if you out there are thinking, well, if they would just get online, then they would meet someone in no time, because stupid eHarmony commercials tell you that somebody falls in love every 14 seconds or whatever it is.
I literally got that
No.
text from my mom in a grocery store one time. Did you know? She's like, did you know that every 8 minutes somebody finds love on eHarmony? And I'm like, good for them.
Yes.
I'm getting chocolate milk.
Oh my word. Okay.
All right. Point 4.
So following up with that, it's not a matter of me just being quote unquote too picky.
Preach
Which I
it.
feel like dovetails nicely from the other one, because it's not like you have this whole list of people that are completely perfectly compatible and you'll get along with great and you both find each other attractive and like whatever, and you're just being too picky because of these tiny little things. No, that's not it. I think if anything, a lot of girls overlook things they shouldn't because they've been told, oh, well, I'm just being too picky, or I don't give enough grace, or I'm looking for Prince Charming, or I whatever. It's not a matter of that. Are there girls who are too picky? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But just because someone is not married, maybe they're a little older, they're trying to date, but it never works out, it doesn't automatically mean that they're being too picky. That's where you stop and say, hey, so what are you looking for? What are your standards? Let's look at this and see if they're reasonable. And if they are, girl, more power to you. You don't settle on those things. You hold to those standards. Be called too picky all you want to, because those things that you're looking for are what a godly man should be. And that's what I want for you. And I don't care how long it takes.
Amen.
That's what we need to be telling girls.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I have nothing to add to that. That was just so good.
Okay. This
Next,
one's especially Kristen's favorite.
oh my gosh, yes. Next point. Not every guy without a wedding ring is a potential date. Let me read that again. Not every guy without a wedding ring is a potential date. The number of times someone would say to me, oh, have you thought about so-and-so? Have you thought about so-and-so? I'm like, is the only qualifier you have is the fact that they're not married? Because that is not all it takes.
Yeah.
And the number of times people are like, oh, I should set you up with this person. Or would you go out with this person? And most of the time the answer was no. Going back to the picky thing. Not because I was picky, but because like it takes more than a guy being single for me to be like, oh, sure, I'll go out with him. Like,
Yeah.
I have a few more qualifiers than that. And that's okay. Like, I would get so like frustrated, be like, oh, what about this person? What about this person? What about this person? I'm like, oh my gosh, can I pick somebody for myself, please?
One caveat there, maybe, I don't know, if there is some room for preference in this, if you like being set up, more power to you.
Yeah.
Like, that's fine. I don't mind it. I'm like, you're like, there's things I want to know before I go out with someone. I'm more of the thought, which is totally fine, by the way.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not, you know, I'm not.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
That's I'm not saying that's not how it should be. But for me, I'm fine with saying, sure, I'll go out with him and figure out those things on that date to decide if I want to go out with him again.
Yeah.
I'm more fine with that.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say,
That's true. That's
if you are, it's okay. If you're not, it's also okay. But to the generation that has come before us, who this is to, know the people in your life well enough to know if they would like that or not.
I was literally just about to say
Ask
the same
them,
thing.
hey, I don't know if you like to be set up or not. It's totally fine if you don't. And maybe even ask them that separate of an incident where you're gonna be like, but I have this guy.
Yeah.
You know, just ask them in general. Because if you lead with, hey, what would you prefer? Do you like to be set up? Are you okay with it? Whatever. I feel free to say, no, I'm really not. But if you lead with, hey, so there's this guy that works with my daughter's brother's sister's parakeet. Really great guy. Would you want to go out with him? Then I'm in this really awkward place of saying no to this person, as opposed to just no to the idea of being set up. So it's a subtle thing, but it makes a big difference as far as like the comfort level,
yeah.
whatever, of the person that is potentially going to be set up.
Yes. And I'll like add two things to that.
Yeah.
One, as the person who is in the dating scene, obviously we're talking about pickiness earlier. Be picky in who you let set you up.
Yes.
I was very picky with who I let set me up. It was a very short list.
Yeah.
Because I knew who knew me really well. I knew who knew what I was looking for. And so I was picky on that. And if you're someone trying to set somebody else up, ask the question like Bethany said. And just even before that, don't assume that just because you you're married and you have a single person in your life that they want your help.
Yeah.
That might be kind of harsh. I'm sorry.
True.
But like, I feel like it's just, you know, a lot of people who are married are like, oh, it is, I have achieved the goal that they seem to be searching for. Let me help them. And they may not want your help.
Yep.
And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
No,
they may
there's
have other
not.
people helping them and you don't know that. So
And it's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Just so don't assume. And then if you really are like Ben, I'm like, oh, I have the perfect person for this girl in my church. Ask her first, hey, what are your thoughts on being set up? And then maybe the next week be like, so after our conversation, you said this, I was thinking, and I have this guy. Thoughts. And last thing, don't get your feelings hurt if they say no. This is not like something you need to take personally.
Not rejecting you.
They're not rejecting you. They're allowed to have preferences. So don't go in with, oh, like this has to happen.
And they're going to get married.
And they're going to get married. If it doesn't work out, that's okay.
Yeah.
Like you tried and then you move on.
Yep.
So
ready?
Yes.
Okay. Speaking of moving on to the next point.
Yes.
And this one, I don't know that it really needs much explanation. This is just a reminder that it's a reminder that reminding me that I'm not getting any younger doesn't help anything.
That's such a terrible statement. You're not getting any younger.
Yeah.
Neither are you.
Quit being so picky. You're not getting any younger. I'm like, excuse me. So now that I'm of a certain age, I should just settle? Like, if these are not things you would tell someone 10 years younger than me that they should compromise on, then probably I shouldn't either.
I want to tell somebody that about like writing their will. Like an older person. Like, have you written your will yet? I mean, you're not getting any younger. Like, I would never say that to somebody. But the truth is, they're closer to death than I am.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, what's the joke that's like every time you go to a wedding as a single person and all the old people are like, oh, Sweeney, you're next. And like, what if we started going to funerals and saying that to all the old people? Like, oh honey, you're next. Like, it's so awful. You don't know that. I mean, you can assume, but like, you don't know that. That's a terrible thing. And I know obviously the connotation is very different, but it's kind of funny and dark, but kind of makes the point. And it's like, no, it's just, that's never a good thing to say ever. So, all right. Last point. Wrapping it up here. If there was something I wanted our moms to know, mom's generation to know, not my mom. My mom knows this. My mom and I have had conversations about this. Believe it or not, there are actually perks to being single. And I think that this is another thing that our parents aren't super familiar with because they weren't single for very long. If they got married early.
Right.
If they were in that camp. My mom was barely 21 when she got married. She was still in college.
My mom was still 19.
Right.
Only for a month.
Yeah, but
she
still.
was 19 when they got married.
Yeah. My mom had 2 more years of college.
Yep.
My dad had just graduated and was about to turn 22. And they both went from their parents' house to getting married and living with each other.
Yep.
And the whole like growing up and figuring things out on their own happened when they were together, whereas for me that happened when I was by myself. And that's okay. Like there were a lot of like really fun things. I will never forget when I came home from Israel and my mom was like, you're getting to do a lot of really cool things that I never got to do. And she was like, I'm really glad you're like finding ways to enjoy this, because at first I wasn't. I was like, nope, life is on hold until I get a husband. And then I was like, no, I'm not gonna just waste my time and just sit around looking at my watch until some dude walks in for me to do all the fun stuff. And so like I have gone on trips. I've done a lot of shopping, a lot. Don't regret one bit of it. And you know, just we've done episode on episode of like best parts about being single and stuff like that. So I'm not going to sit here and repeat all of those, but there are perks, and it's not just like, oh, your life's going to be miserable until you have a spouse. That is not the case at all. There are a lot of really good things, and there are a lot of really good things about being single for a while before you get married that I believe will set you up well for marriage.
Yeah.
And because you have had to learn to like, I didn't go straight from, oh, my parents were taking care of me to now my husband is.
Right.
And it's like, oh no, I had to take care of myself, and I had to pay my own bills. And like we talked about a few weeks ago, make all my own decisions and figure out how to fix the, you know, flusher on my toilet and like stuff like that, you know, that I never would have had to do if I hadn't like, and I know that's a dumb example, but
but it makes the point.
Yeah. Like there are things that you're going to learn being single for a while that you'll be really grateful for when you get married. It might make it a little easier once you're married than if you have to learn that while you're also learning this brand new person and you're learning who you are as an adult. Not to say that one's better or worse than the other. They're just different. They're different routes to take. But I think for the longest time, it seemed like, oh, the getting married young was the right way. and the less ideal way was being single for a while and then getting
Yeah.
married later. And I just don't think that's true. I know that's not true.
Yeah.
And there are pros and cons to both.
I agree. I think that's a perfect way to wrap it up.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We would love it if you would share this, not just with your friends, but if you have a person in your life of an older generation that you think this would be helpful for them to listen to spark some conversations, feel free to share it with them too. We would love that. And we hope that you have some really awesome, productive, meaningful conversations that come from stuff like this that we've talked about today. So do that. We'll be back on Friday with another Couchcast Revisited.
Yes.
So stay tuned for that. But until then, I'm Kristen.
And I'm Bethany.
And this is Looking for the Middle.